Thank you very much, everyone, for being present, and welcome back again to this panel, Dependent Origination in the Indo-Tibetan Tradition. I think we will have a great time since our three speakers come from different backgrounds, and it's really intriguing to learn their insight and their experience. So since it's 3:05, I think not taking much of your time, may I hand over the floor to the chair, please?
Good afternoon, everybody. So we have a panel now on dependent origin in the Indo-Tibetan tradition. We've had our speakers introduced. I'm Alexander Wynn. Thank you for introducing us. And our first speaker is Dr. Mattia Salvini from Mahidol University, head of the PhD program, international program in Buddhist studies, who replaced me there and done a very good job. Mattia.
Vidutakalpanajala gambhirodharamurtaye namassamantabhadraya samantasphuranatvishe Atragatibhyaha sarvebhyaha bhikshu sangapurasarebhyaha namo namaha. Thank you very much for coming here, and happy birthday to Venerable Dhammasami. Piram tishtantu panditaah. Thank you very much to Alex for the kind introduction and to everyone for being here. I will try to read some texts and offer some comments. My main contention, which I will try to render more and more explicit, is that grammar, understood as vyakarana, is not just an extraneous and very abstruse set of tools used to understand how certain minute details of language work, but rather it has philosophical significance in the Sanskrit Buddhist tradition, and I expect in the Pali Buddhist tradition too. You will see that some of the discussions that I will highlight have very strong Pali parallels. So, when we look at the grammar of Pratitya Samutpada, we notice that we have two very different options to understand this term. These options are so different that one of the two options would exclude the possibility of translating it as we normally do, understanding pratitya as implying dependence. We would have to have a completely different translation when we were we to follow that option, as you will see. So it's not something insignificant. So let me, oops, I just made a disaster. Sorry, I'm really not very good with the Macintosh. I pressed something, the thing disappeared. Yeah? Thank you, I'll try to be more careful. Okay, apologies for that. So, there are two possible derivations for the word pratitya samutpada. The difference is not so much in respect to the samutpada part. This is fairly straightforward and is understood similarly by most commentators that I have looked at. The difficult part is the pratitya. The difficulty is that we can take this either as a kradanta forming an indeclinable, an avyaya, in which case we have a sense of dependence, or we can take pratitya as a tadditanta. If we take pratitya as a tadditanta, the sense is completely different. The main referent then is no more just an action, but a thing undergoing that action, namely things which are vinashvara. And then the overall meaning of pratitya samutpada means the arising of things which are bound to disappear, something along those lines, which is not the same as dependent arising, if you wish. Now, the two derivations can be summarized, well, as follows. If we want to have a very brief summary, we have prati, which is an upasarga, plus vedhatu I, plus lyap. Or, first we form a kridanta with I plus twin, so we form iti, and then we form a tadditanta by adding the taddita pratyaya yan, then we get itya. We add the upasarga at last, and so we get pratitya in this completely different way. The first derivation is the one which actually causes also some philosophical tension. The derivation which is the most common derivation causes a certain philosophical tension which is discussed at some length in the commentaries, as we will see, and which actually becomes completely imperceptible once we rely just on the English translation dependent. The reason is that Tuanta and Lyabanta are a type of formation which have no clear parallel in function from a single English term. They indicate that it is a prior action by the same agent, not by the same subject, but by the same agent, specifically the agent. So that, as you will see, creates a philosophical problem. We don't see that problem anymore once we translate the term with dependent, because we do not have the same implication. We don't have the same grammatical underpinning. So it's a unique feature of Sanskrit and Pali grammar, because the same feature is also true of parallel forms in Pali, that creates interesting discussions. For me, philosophically very interesting discussions. If we follow the first derivation a little bit more in detail, we can see the relevant rules for this derivation. In Gatau, this indicates what is the value of the root I. It's one of the gati dhatus, so one of the dhatus which indicate movement, and they also indicate understanding. All the gati dhatus also have the sense of understanding. Then we have a traditional verse which is quoted in many different sources, and here I have reproduced it in the way in which it appears in the Prasannapada. This is a verse which tells us something about what upasargas can do. Upasargena dhatvartho baladanyatra niyate ganga sarilamadhuryam sagarena yatambasa. So the idea is that the upasarga can really change the meaning of the root. And this is very important in our case, because the root I on its own doesn't give us the sense of prapti. And we want the sense of prapti to get to the sense of dependence. So actually here, the upasarga is extremely important. Then we have the rule from Panini, which regulates the usage of Tuanta and Lyabanta, samana kartrakayoho purvakale. So when we have two dhatus which refer to the same kartra, so the same agent, and among these two roots, the one which refers to the prior action, purvakale, is the one which takes this lyabanta. So if there is the same agent, and I should mention this, agent does not mean a person, not necessarily. This is an important point which I would like to highlight. The notion of agent in Sanskrit doesn't have to do with persons. So when agents are done away with, it has nothing to do with doing away with a permanent self or a permanent person. We will see this later on in the discussion, but if you want to have a glimpse at how this works, you could look at one of the verses of the first chapter of Abhidharma Kosha, where there is a discussion elicited by the statement that chakshuhu pashyati rupani. And the point there is the chakshuhu is the kartra. Why? Because it's the most prominent causal factor. So whatever we wish to express as the most prominent causal factor in an assemblage of causes and conditions is what we call kartra. It doesn't have to be a person. It could be a leaf falling. If I say that patram padati, patram is the kartra of the action padati. Another relevant rule, but this actually comes from Katyayana, so it's a Vartika, is this example of Vyadaya swapiti iti upasankyanam apurva kalatva. So there are cases where there is no strict temporal succession between the two actions. Just like when one says one sleeps by opening one's mouth. But there is a small debate. Nava swapnasya avakalatvat. Or maybe we don't even need to do this exception because, in fact, sleeping happens just after it. So this option also is given. But I have quoted this because Vasubandhu himself refers to this. And I think this is the most ancient reference to that example brought up by Vasubandhu. The second derivation, actually, in a way, it is simpler. It's a bit more counterintuitive, but it's not very well represented in secondary literature, and it's extremely difficult to translate, not only in English. If you read the Tibetan translation of the Prasannapada, where this derivation also appears, you will find that it's very difficult to follow. It's natural that when grammatical sections of commentaries appear, they are very, very difficult to render in any other language. So again, we have Ingatau. Then this is one of the important, sorry, here I should have put a Visarga, but anyways. Pratihi is Vipsarta, and then we have Striyam Ktuin. So one of the Krit Pratyayas used for Bhave, predominantly when it is in the feminine gender, is Ktuin, which gives rise to forms like Gati from the root Gam, or Iti from the root I. So Iti is the same form as Gati. And then to this Kradanta, we can add the Tadditanta Yan by following Tatra Sadhu, so something which is suitable for that particular activity. So for example, Sharane Sadhu Sharanyam. And here it is Itau Sadhava Ityaha. So this is the second derivation. This is how we can summarize it. Now I would like to look at how, again, this grammatical tradition discusses especially the first derivation, because that's the one which becomes most contentious in philosophical terms. So these are the rules which I have already shown. And here you can see that Patanjali, the Mahabhashya, expands slightly on the discussion, explaining the implications of what Katyayana had said regarding whether we can do this exception of, you see, Vyadaya is a Lyabanta, Swapiti means someone sleeps. So it should be the same agent doing two consecutive actions. But when we say that someone opens one's mouth and sleeps, we usually mean that the two actions happen at the same time. So this is what this discussion is about. Then the Chandra Vyakarana, which happens to be quite influential for the Pali grammatical tradition, therefore should be of interest to you as well, makes a very significant to me addition, which is Parapekshava, this very short sentence, Parapekshayava. So this Lyabanta, Ktwanta or Lyabanta, can also have the sense of dependence on something else. So this is an interesting addition, because if we follow Chandra, then it looks like we could get the sense of dependence from the grammatical formation itself. The Kashika expands a little bit and also tells us why we say that it's samana karatrakayoho, because then it shows that we would use a different form, namely aktavatu, if we wanted to show that there is no samana karatrakatva, And why we say Purvakale? Because if it's not Purvakale, if it is at the same time, we just use two finite forms with cha. Vrajati cha, jalpati cha. And then we have the same example of Astyam Vyadaya Swapiti Chakshu Sammilya Hasatiti Upasankyanam Apurvakalatvat. The Kashika gives us the Upasankyana, it doesn't give us the option of not doing the exception. So I think this is also important. I also add the Ka-tantra for two reasons, namely, you might recognize this sutra if you're familiar with the Pali grammatical tradition. You remember the sutra Ekakattukanam Pubbakale? That's how the Pali grammatical tradition regulates the same usage. Of course, the dual is not important. The Dvivachanam is Aswatantra, it's just an example. But this is, I think, the model for the Pali grammatical traditions handling of the same grammatical formation. One of the points which I find interesting of the Ka-tantra usage here is that there is a small discussion of cases where we do not have samana kartrakatva. So there are cases in Sanskrit texts and in Pali texts too where Twanta or Lyabantas are used, but in fact we do not have the strict rule that it's the same agent. So the example given here is Mritam drishtva dukkam bhavati. After having seen a dead person, there is suffering, there is some pain. Pain here is the agent of bhavati, but it's not the agent of drishtva. So strictly speaking, there is no samana kartrakatva. If we wanted to have samana kartrakatva, we would have to say something like Mritam drishtva dukkitaha bhavati. That would have been a more strict usage. But the commentator on the Ka-tantra doesn't like these usages. He acknowledges that they exist, but he says that this is chintyam. This type of usage is chintyam. And the word chintyam in grammar usually means it's not very good. It's something that we should avoid. However, I'm aware that there is at least one commentator on a Vedic text which makes the point that sometimes we can have this absence of samana kartrakatva. And also, unfortunately, I did not have the time to bring it up, but I think Pali grammarians mention that. So for those of you who are interested in Pali grammar, you could have a look and see whether you can find instances where Pali grammarians explicitly say that there is no sameness of agent. Now, all these might sound very abstruse. How is it relevant to philosophy? Well, now I'm going to show you. In the Abhidharmakosha Bhashya, we have a discussion of Pratitya Samutpada, primarily in terms of Dwadashanga, and actually Maxime is going to show you some passages from that part. At the end of a discussion of a Dwadashanga, there is a discussion of what kind of entity is Pratitya Samutpada. And at some point, one opponent, somebody from the Mahishasaka, according to Yashomitra, brings up the possibility that Pratitya Samutpada actually is asamskrita. It's one of the unproduced dharmas. And the textual basis to say so is a sutra which has been quoted 3 minutes. I might take 5. It's a sutra which has been quoted earlier in its Pali form, which is Utpadatva Tatagatanam and Utpadatva Tatagatanam, etc. So, where Pratitya Samutpada is basically described as Vedharmata. So, in that occasion, the Mahishasaka take that at the textual basis to say that Pratitya Samutpada is asamskrita, is an unproduced dharma. And this is refuted just on the basis of the feature of the word. It includes samutpada. Samutpada includes utpada. Utpada is one of the Samskrita lakshanas. If for something utpadopi pradnyayate, then that cannot be a Samskrita. That's the argument. And then it is asked, then what kind of padartha is pratitya samutpada. So what is the meaning of the word pratitya samutpada? How should we understand it? And then we start with the meaning of the upasarga. So pratihi praptyartha, etir gatyartha, and here we have etir. That's when we quote the root by quoting the third person singular present and treating it as a noun. Like for the root bhu, if we were to use bhavatihi. So here is etihi, is for the root I, actually. Then the meaning of the root is modified by prati, so we get the meaning of prapti, thanks to the upasarga. And then there is something about samutpada. So when pad is preceded by samut, it has the sense of pradurbhava, coming into existence, manifesting. So pratitya samutpada means arising after obtaining a condition. So what's the problem with that? Now the problem is, when you use aktvanta or lyabanta, you need to have the same agent doing two action. But who is going to do the action of samutpada and first do the action of depending? The thing which is supposed to do the action of depending has not yet arisen. It doesn't exist. So you see the problem? If I say that Devadatta runs and then is born, it doesn't make sense. He has to be born before he can run. So here we have the same exact situation. We have adharma, an entity, is supposed first to do the action of pratitya and then the action of samutpada. So how do we solve this problem? And here you can see that there are several solutions. One solution is, we don't care because we are vaibhashikas. We believe in the existence of the three times, so we can sort it out through that. That's one of the solutions. This is represented here by 4. The second explanation is that we shouldn't take the difference between action and agent too strongly. Like, we shouldn't take the ontological implication too strongly. There's the gap between grammar and reality is sufficient to allow us to kind of sidestep this problem. A third response is that we have cases of simultaneity, and here one of the examples given is asyam vyadaya shete. So here we go back to Katyayana, very ancient grammarian. Also, the other solution is you completely misunderstood the word. It's actually not a lyabanta, it's a tadditanta, so the whole issue doesn't even arise. And that is if we follow the second derivation that I had mentioned earlier. So, okay, I have shown this in as briefly as I could. One additional point that I would like to make is that understanding the proper formation of lyabantas and pratitya samutpada is very important to understand certain more nuanced interpretations of pratitya samutpada, such as, for example, Nagarjuna. So, for example, it helps understanding the relationship between conceptual dependence and ontological dependence. The verse that was quoted earlier, yav pratitya samutpadam shunyatadam prachakshmahe sa prajnapti rupadaya. You remember? Well, upadaya prajnapti and pratitya samutpada are very similar forms. And when we understand how the similarity works, we can better understand this relationship between conceptual dependence and ontological dependence. But now I have no more time, so I will stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mattia. So now we move on to our second talk of the panel, Dr. Maxim Voroshilov.
It's okay. I think that one, I guess, because I want to make it bigger. Right. Yeah, right. Perhaps my report will be the most boring. I will be talking about text. I will be showing you blurry, dark images, and afraid to make you feel drowsy. But so the title is Editing the Pratitya Samutpada section in Vasubandhu's Abhidharma Kosha Bhashya, or I could call it towards a new edition of the section on Pratitya Samutpada. So I'll be talking about establishing the text, and basically the text with which scholars and translators work now has been edited and published in 1967. It's the edition by Pradhan, and on the screen you will see it often as E. So that E refers to Pradhan's edition. And very often also there will be sigla A, which will stand for the manuscript, which is actually the only surviving manuscript which was found, discovered in the monastery of No in Tibet in 1936. And luckily the copies have been taken, and these copies have been preserved. So I work with the reproductions of that manuscript. So that's our most important textual witness. So I will talk about the textual problems and that I encountered when working with edition, and how they have been solved or sometimes not solved when I started working with the manuscript. So here I'll just summarize very briefly and roughly the types of textual problems I encountered. Misreadings of the manuscript by the author, by the editor, emendations based on Tibetan readings, or can be some other texts, different interpretation of manuscripts readings, and miscellaneous is the problems that still have to be solved. Just to remind you about that, what you will see on the screen, AKBH will stand for Abhidharma Kosha Bhashya, E is the edition by Pradhan, E2 is the recent edition, Bauddha Bharati edition, and I use it mostly to show how this edition follows the edition of Pradhan. So it follows all the inaccuracies if they are there. Sorry for the master LVP, that's abbreviation to Louis de la Vallée-Poussin, who translated, who made a full, complete translation of Abhidharma Kosha from Chinese, when that Sanskrit manuscript has not yet been discovered. Okay, without further ado, we will go to examples. That's an example from, sorry, I forgot to say that this section is in chapter 3 of Abhidharma Kosha, called Loka Nirdesha, which deals with the 5 gatis, 5 people, 5 places in the universe and samsara where the beings are reborn. It discusses intermediate being and types of birth, and after that we have the discussion of Pratitya Samutpada. So, okay, here I will try to show you with the cursor. First we have the reading in Pradhan edition, and then I put it a little bit, that correction that not I came up with, but depending on the textual witnesses, what is the solution? For example, we have here this reading. Okay. Yavat shadayatanam notpadyate savastha namarupam tavat shadayatanam ityuchyate. It's a little bit messed up and it gives strange impression. So once we look in the manuscript, so I'll probably enlarge it a little bit. Okay, I'm not sure. Does the cursor show it? Okay. Right, so we have this part here that says sa was tha. Then we have small marks here that indicate the insertion. Insertion is, if you go up above the first line, it is written here, nama rupa.